Hey friends, hope you're all doing well. So in this video, I'm going to talk about being a Christian with a 9 to 5 job, or if you're in the trades like me, it probably looks more like 7 to 3. So for context, God's command for us is to go out into the world and spread the good news of His word to other people. And in a perfect world, if we had all the free time in the world, all of us could be full-time missionaries, not having to worry about providing for ourselves in terms of housing or food. All of that God would provide, and He does, but for only a select few of us are we called to that through direct missions work all the time. So for most of us, our schedule looks like going to a job for a secular company. And there's nothing wrong with doing that as a Christian, because we're supposed to be salt of the earth. We're people that are living in this world, but not of this world. So having said that, I think there's definitely some good practices that we should all try to live up to when it comes to being an example for Christ in our day-to-day lives in the workplace. So one of the first things that I know is very common in the corporate 9 to 5 world. I personally am not in a job like this, but I know a lot of people will go out for happy hour after work. And that's a great way to interact with your coworkers outside of the office or whatever environment you work in. Although happy hour is usually done at a bar or a very secular environment. Now, it's not like going to a bar late at night where you're basically elbow to elbow with everyone else in there and it's impossible to have a conversation. I think if you're going to like happy hour with your coworkers, then you're naturally going to talk about things that aren't work related, because most people, I would think, don't want to stress about whatever project deadline they have next. So as a Christian, that would be a good opportunity to bring up Jesus in conversation, because I mean, you're technically off the clock, and obviously you got to use discretion with it. Like, I wouldn't encourage you to do something that would jeopardize your job and your way of life, but I would say that, like, if you can explain the gospel when it's relevant to the conversation and it's in a theologically accurate and socially appropriate way, then go for it. I would say that's the best time to share the gospel in the workplace. The other thing that I want to bring up, that if you work for a secular company, is having a boss who might not be a Christian. Now, everyone's boss is going to be different, but I have had plenty of bosses over the years who are not Christians. And the best way I can say to deal with that is don't get angry. Think of James 1:19. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And do the work in a polite but assertive way. So don't let your boss push you around, but also don't be aggressive and hostile towards them for no good reason. Like, that's not Christ-like of us to complain that way. So, but I would say that having a boss who is a Christian is a wonderful blessing, but not all of us are blessed with that. And I would say that if your boss is not a Christian, then just focus on being the best employee you can. If the boss is very toxic to the workplace environment, then at that point I would say look for another job, because I've done that before. But if your boss is fair with you and your boss doesn't try to power trip or act in an un-Christ-like manner, then I personally think that their views on whether they're a Christian or not are not as important in a workspace setting. Obviously, from a person-to-person relationship, everyone's salvation is important because all of us are either going to heaven or hell. But in the workplace and on a professional level, I think having an unbeliever boss can still be a positive relationship if they treat you fairly and are respectful to you, and you are treat them fairly as well. So that's another thing that you'll have to deal with in the workplace as a Christian. I would say the last point that any Christian will have to deal with in the workspace are coworkers. Obviously, like, if you work in an office or in a blue-collar trade environment, like, you're going to deal with people from very different walks of life. And that's something that we should do as Christians, because a lot of us have the tendency to only hang out with people who look like us, think like us, act like us. And I think it's just human nature to segregate ourselves that way. But you never know, because I've had instances at my job where coworkers know I'm a believer, and they'll start acting like different towards me, if that makes any sense. Like, some people just laugh it off, but other people, they start getting more intrigued by how I act and how I carry myself. And as a Christian, I think that's just Jesus shining through me and seeds being planted in the coworkers' heads, because they might not be a believer, or they may have a different view of Christianity than we do, but if you're living out the gospel in the workspace, never underestimate how much impact that can have on your coworkers. And I would say that, Lord willing, if you're able to cultivate relationships with those coworkers and just have more water cooler conversations with them over time, then God might use you in that job to lead them to Christ. So having unbeliever coworkers is not an automatic death blow to your social life at your job. I mean, for me personally, like, having coworkers that engage in worldly gossip and other unproductive talk, I kind of keep to myself around them, because I don't like being around that kind of behavior. But I still think that God can use me at my job to be a light in the dark world that we live in. And I would encourage anyone watching this to, obviously, if there's any coworkers that you care about that might not be a believer, pray for them, because God can use your interactions with them to lead them to Christ. And you never know how long it will take. It could be after they leave or after you leave. Even if you never see any fruit of it when you're working at your job, God can do miracles behind closed doors. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you all next time. Hope you have a wonderful day. God bless.